Blog Talk Radio.
Gambrell and Russell presents Speaking of Green. Good morning, everybody. This is Beth Bond coming to you live from Decatur, Georgia, and we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics. As most of my listeners know, I am a big advocate for solar, and we've got a special guest, Perry Bell, who is with Solar Energy USA, who's going to be our guest today. And let me just give you a little background on him, and then we'll get right into the questions with Perry. Perry is exactly where he should be. His previous career saw him as co-president of one of the nation's largest replacement window companies, and recognizing an opportunity in home energy efficiency and savings via the popular Energy Star window offering, Perry made a transition and started an energy-focused company. Now, as the head of two energy-related companies, Perry is taking the experience learned in the home improvement world and radically changing the way home and business owners look at paying for power. Solar Energy USA, his first renewable energy venture, is a national provider of affordable solar solutions and the largest residential solar company in Georgia. Net Zero USA, the most recent undertaking, exists to help others understand how energy reduction and energy production can have dramatic effects on a power bill. The term net zero refers to a home or building that has zero net energy consumption and produces 100% of its own energy needs. And Net Zero USA is now showing the world how great it is to be energy independent. Welcome, Perry.
Beth, thank you for having me on.
So, y'all are located up in Alpharetta, which is basically another northern suburb of Atlanta, but you're doing work pretty much all over the southeast.
We are. We're basically a national network of licensees across the country. So we support and design systems for different groups that are under our umbrella, and that's how we support them. So we're pretty much in really about 6 states right now.
Awesome. And clearly, as our listeners who've listened to us for a while know, Georgia is in sort of an interesting conversation with solar. There's like great gains being made, and at the same time, you know, many people are wishing that we were even more progressive than what we've done. What are you finding in other states?
Well, I mean, every state's different, and you get into different utility rates as well. The Southeast for us is generally a less costly power area. So for us to be able to be successful in this market demonstrates that we can pretty much do it in any market. But, you know, the challenges are normal. If you don't have the incentives, then it's hard to make some things work for the masses, but it certainly works for some people. But in different states that are more progressive, incentives kind of play into the hands of making it better for a larger group of people.
And, of course, this all fits into the goals of your company. So what are your goals for your company, and how does that fit into the global energy challenges of the future?
Well, first, you know, we have to take it on a small scale and then grow it. But we're building a national network to deliver energy reduction and energy production products to the end user. And, you know, that's going to be commercial side and the residential side. So we have two different divisions of the company. And what this does is it helps manufacturers have a large footprint almost overnight, even though our build-out is a 5 to 6 plus year build-out for the network. But at least it gives the manufacturers the ability to push a solution out and already have the relationship with the end user. So that's pretty much what our goal is, and that's the direction that we head. So we're definitely advocates for solar in Georgia, but of course we're stretching out and working in places and states where there's zero incentives, that, you know, semi-similar to Georgia as well, but we're also working for the long-term play as well. So, you know, that's pretty much where we're going. And
the global aspect of it is if we can be successful here in the States with the variety. I mean, I know it sounds crazy to say this, but the variety of challenges we have here in the States, then certainly this will help us grow into the international market too.
Well, it does. I mean, if you look at the way the United States is, I usually draw this parallel and say if you go over to Europe and you look at Germany or you look at any other single country, what you get into is each of those countries is equal to a state in the United States. So it's less bureaucratic because it's all self-contained and it doesn't deal with a national approach that is cumbersome. So in the United States, every different state acts almost like a different country. So one state will have incentives, one state will have a different utility company, are companies. So you could have a deregulated state next door to a regulated state, and then you could have incentives in one state and next door not have those incentives, and then you have your national incentives, and then you've got a time frame on those incentives. So those are the challenges, but once you can demonstrate that it can work without any of those things, then that's when it starts to play itself around on a global scale. And keep in mind, I don't know the exact percentages, but I know in some countries, I mean, even like Colombia and South America, 50 to 60% of the country doesn't have electricity. So the challenges are even different there. They don't have a advanced centralized grid as other primary countries do. So their challenges are just getting power anywhere for any amount of time. And so the global challenge is different than our challenge in the States. Our challenge in the States is to get it to be a large supplemental process in delivery of power to people across the country, and then allow people to find somewhat independence as well if they so see fit.
So the other thing that I think that you do, because there's a lot of installers who are sort of focusing where their bread and butter is, but you actually have approached both residential and commercial, but you actually have different approaches for them. Can you explain what the difference is, please?
Well, there's a big difference between the two. Residential houses are built. Well, the residential business itself is a lead generation business. Commercial is not so much that. Commercials go out and introduce yourself, have a relationship, and educate the people about what you're doing, and then demonstrate the financial model. And that's where the parallel is between the two. It's a financial model for residential and commercial, but commercial is less emotional. Commercial is just flat out a numbers game, and it makes sense, and there's more long-term planning in commercial, so commercial can sometimes make a little bit more sense for a group, and then whereas a homeowner, it may be a little bit more challenging. However, when you're looking at the business between the two is completely different. When we go to a residential house, what we're looking at is thermally improving the house and making the house perform better. That way we work on energy reduction. And energy reduction comes from thermally improving the house, whether it be spray foam or windows or things along those lines, to get the house to work better, because energy reduction ultimately costs less than energy production. So if we can reduce energy, then we don't need those same kilowatt hours that we once did before. And then we need lesser of a solar system to help support whatever our goal is, whether it's getting rid of half or all or whatever the percentage of electricity demand that we're using, and whatever we're leaning on solar to do that for us. Whereas in commercial is a different program. Commercial buildings by nature are very, very inefficient. So to try to approach and retrofit thermal improvement on a building, commercial building, is usually a lost cause, and it's a lot of money with a little bit of bang for the buck. So what we usually do on the commercial side is we work on the introductory stages of reducing or improving the lighting, which is improving the delivery of the type of light so that it's a better work environment, but also reducing the wattage used for that light. And that's the easiest, most quantifiable thing in the beginning. Then we start working with power correction, and then finally solar, just to create pure kilowatt hours to offset the demand. And so those are the two differences between commercial and residential.
So really, when you're talking residential, we're sort of getting into that net zero concept. Is that something that homeowners get, or is there sort of a steep education curve there?
Well, yeah, there's an education because it's not normal. I mean, people have misconception, and when you get into talking about hurdles, that's one of them. And the misconception is, hey, I don't want to pay the power company anymore. And the power company isn't always the bad guy. They're just trying to. It's a system where there's a centralized delivery of power, and they're trying to provide that for everybody. And then they want to protect their business, so that's where the conflict comes into place. They're granted their monopoly, so it's tough for them to give that up or any part of it up because they still got to maintain their costs and service those costs and exist as a company and service their customers. But to be a net zero homeowner, you have two options. You can either be off grid or you can go for a net zero net metering concept, and that's the most practical one because when you do net metering, you're still using the power company. You create power during the day, and you offset as much energy as you can. And sometimes you may even run your meter backwards. And then in the evening, when you when you're using electricity and there is no sunlight, then you're pulling power back from the grid. And then at the end of the month, you pay the net difference from what you created to what you used. So if you get into a situation where you use less energy than you create, then you're net zero because you're creating more energy than you're using, so your footprint is a zero footprint, and that's the concept. But yes, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to people immediately. I think it does require a little bit of desire to understand how it operates and how it works before you can bring customers to becoming a paying customer. They have to understand it.
And so we're limited by some financial hurdles here in Georgia, but in other states that you're working in, are you able to go in and sort of do these because it's really more than just solar. It's truly sort of a complete energy efficiency retrofit kind of scenario.
Yeah, it's interesting because the wind is a 100-year-old business, and nobody's ever bought a window thinking about return investment so much. They just know they need new windows, so they get new windows. And with kitchen, you don't think about your return on your investment. You're told by the salesman that it will add X amount of value to your house, but 10 years from now it will have zero because it'll be outdated. So it just depends on what you're looking for as far as the return goes. Solar is different in all respects because it continues this tenacious and it just drives power. It gives you power consistently annually, and you can count on it for you to supplement your needs. So, but when you go from state to state, incentives are always shaky, because they may threaten another business or mainline power delivery source. So it's you can't really count on that so much. So as a company, the main thing is just to try to create the most economical solution for the end user, depending less and less on incentives, and eventually we'll get there. For right now, there's a lot of early adopters, and there's people who do understand it and who do get it. We have customers that are completely off grid. That's not the normal. That's not the vast majority. That does exist. And to give you an example, as an office, we're in an 8,000 square foot office building, and we're completely net zero. We produce more power than we use. So it's just what we've decided to do, and it made financial sense for us long term. Short term, if we were challenged financially, then we probably wouldn't have been able to make that choice or that decision.
Do y'all sell back onto the grid?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
And clearly, and that also is sort of like the Nirvana scenario. But let's talk about some of the short-term hurdles that companies face with their energy usage and where the blocks are.
Short-term hurdles. Well, for example, every company has the same process. When you're growing, you're going to have cash strains at some point in time. If you're growing, if you get to a certain level and you stabilize at that level, then the challenges are less. But once you try to prepare yourself for more business and shorten the time process of that can money, then you have these financial issues that you have to deal with. But that's just normal business and small business growth type of issues that everybody has to deal with. For us, it's just being diverse and finding solutions that serve the customer and serve our long-term goal, which is helping people reduce their energy consumption. And that's ultimately what we want to do. I mean, it's larger than just trying to reduce energy and having a green footprint. It's a financial thing for a business. 15 years ago, we weren't threatened so much by global manufacturing. Now, as a country, we are. So if I can go into a business and reduce their fixed costs, I can't do anything with their labor costs because they've already fired, 2 people, and they have one guy doing 2 or 3 jobs. So the businesses in the country are already operating lean as they can as far as personnel goes. They're challenged with health care costs and things like that. They're challenged financially as far as bringing in product and trying to get those costs as lean as possible. So the last thing is energy. And energy, whereas it once wasn't a big deal, is becoming more and more expensive to deliver. And the power companies are having to charge more because there are more challenges for a power company to create this power. They're trying to get coal out of the ground. They're trying to get natural gas out of the ground. Those require a tremendous amount of water, and it challenges the purity of those water, and then they have the responsibility of having to purify that, and there's just more and more and more cost just because there's more and more knowledge that's tagged to what's going on. And so they don't have a choice but to charge more money. And so us as customers, our costs are going up, and it's challenging our businesses and our existence altogether. So if us as a company can go in and help reduce fixed costs on an energy side, which is a big part in industry and manufacturing, then it can be a positive thing, and everybody's involved with this.
Well, and one of the things, I was actually being interviewed on a radio show yesterday myself, and one of the things I was talking about is that, accountants and companies, they spend a lot of time looking at what they see as their big costs, just considering energy is like it's just a fixed cost, and there's nothing we can do about it. But the truth is there's a lot people can do about their energy costs.
Well, there is, and it's just like you were saying. I mean, you got to get educated. And the interesting thing is that, and we see it from state to state, we've gotten educated ourselves because we see the delivery of information on power bills from power company to power company. And most CPAs and accountants and groups like and financial guys, they just look at the bill and they're like, well, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. And there's not a whole lot of information of what they're being charged from. And maybe an electrical engineer or somebody in the warehouse or somebody knows what's going on, but they're having to do their job, and for them to take time out of their day to figure out what they're being charged for and what they're not being charged for and how to improve their electrical situation isn't always a practical solution. So the main thing is for us to come in and help explain what's going on so people can understand how they can make their improvements.
Well, and it's also sort of, hoping that utility can provide that information. And the truth is most utilities can. They just don't have it necessarily set up in their billing system. I do know you can call Georgia Power, and they will be able to give you sort of your usage to see what your usage is like. That's not what the normal resident or business even knows about to do, But I think that it can be really revealing, and I had this great story. I'm on the board for GIPA, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, and one church, and they were basically running the air conditioner 24/7 for one meeting to happen on Wednesdays. And, they just sat down, and they've got an energy efficiency guy in the church, and he said, let me do some assessment for you. And then they found out they were doing this, and they were like, okay, well, we're going to move that meeting to the regular office building, and we're just not going to run the air Monday through Friday in that building, and we just won't scheduling meetings there. They saved $40,000 a year with that one simple change. So having that assessment done can make a huge, huge difference.
Well, you're right. You're exactly right. And it's basically making some of the changes for you. When we do lighting, we usually do occupancy sensors and things like that. And once people get used to them, you don't realize how much you're wasting. When we go in these big manufacturing facilities, there's storage rooms that are huge and the lights are just on 24/7. But it's exactly what you're saying. They're just habits that people, there may be 3 or 4 generations down the line of their boss's boss used to always do it this way, so they come and turn on the switch, and that switch was actually for third shift that hasn't existed for 10 years, and it's habits and trying to do an analysis of what's going on and just improving things. So yeah, there's improvements that can be made everywhere, and people are becoming more and more cognizant of this. It's just because of the cost associated with the electricity and having that fixed cost. And understanding it and understanding how you can make the improvements is very important. And it can get a little complicated. Like residential's a little less complex than commercial. Commercial can have, they have peak demand charges that when machines cycle on in the peak season of July, then that can affect their rates throughout the whole year, whereas residential isn't as compromised by that. There can be penalty demands for poor power factor, and there can be charges for that. Not so much in the Georgia Power area, but other power companies may charge for penalty demand. Georgia Power really doesn't do that. So, it's just understanding all these things as a business owner to put yourself in a better position. And like you said, sometimes it's just simply habits that need to be changed.
Right. Well, we're going to shift gears. Oh, that's a very bad pun and was unintended, but we're going to talk about something that I love to talk about, which is EVs. And then to, add the icing, we're going to talk about how solar and EVs play together. So tell us about what work you're doing in that arena.
Well, it's a hard thing to understand because a lot of people don't understand kilowatt hours and just the basics of power. But once you start to understand that, it makes a little bit of sense. So if you take a 100-watt light bulb and burn it for 10 hours, that's 1,000 watt-hours, which equals 1 kilowatt hour. And then in our area today, it's used about 12.5 cents for that kilowatt hour. Well, a kilowatt hour will take you 4 miles on an electric car, sometimes 5, but 4 to 5 miles, but let's just call it 4. And when you know how much consumption you're using in an electric car, then you can supplement that with the power company. So do you want to, and people usually poke fun and say electric cars and say, well, if you have an electric car, why are you burning coal to power it? Well, in all honesty, it may be less of a carbon impact than bringing oil out of the ground and putting it on a ship and bringing it all the way across the ocean. But I'm not here to have that argument because I don't know the difference between which one's worse or not, because we don't go down either route. We have an electric car, a company car, and what we do is we have solar panels obviously on our roof, and we offset the consumption of that car when we charge it by our solar panels. So we take the amount of kilowatt hours needed, and we can, even though we're not storing our power, we're just utilizing our power. We charge the car in the daytime, and we use the solar panels to offset that energy consumption. So in essence, we've gone about 15,000 miles on our electric car in the last year and a half, and it's all been from solar.
And do y'all have like a strip? I mean, do you have a leaf or do you have a volt or?
We actually have a volt, so we have about 17,000 miles that we've used total, and out of that 17,000 miles, I think we've used maybe 40 gallons of gas or less,
Right, and people keep on. Well, I'll tell you. I'll back up. I was involved with the task force for the city of Atlanta on EVs, and
right.
I spent a lot of time with Clean City Skies and all the EV enthusiasts. And I was sitting at a state legislator panel, and this state legislator was like, I think we should make these illegal because they're small, and I almost hit one pulling into a parking space. Like, wow. So that led me to come back and write the article, EVs are not UFOs. And, I keep on telling people, I'm like, these things are smarter than we are, right? They'll send you text messages. They can tell you all kinds of things. They tell you how to be a better, more efficient driver with energy. It's got all the bells and whistles that you'd want in a regular car in regards to music and, 1,400 satellite stations and all that kind of crazy stuff. But I think if they make you a better driver, because all of a sudden you're getting instant feedback about how you use the energy to propel the car. And the other thing is that people are like, well, aren't they sort of putt-putt? I'm like, these aren't golf carts, I don't think people understand that, you turn on an EV and it's on, right? It's not like this, acceleration where you have to push gas through the engine to make it go faster. So I'm a big, and of course, charging it with solar makes perfect sense, although I will tell you that it is actually lower emissions, hard to believe, but lower emissions to do it on coal, especially if they're charging overnight. But with y'all, y'all sort of have the reverse where you're charging it during the day, and then it sort of becomes an energy storage system too, right, because of solar.
Yeah, the power companies still have to create power. They can't shut down their turbines, so we lose a lot of electricity that's produced. So, and the grid's prepared to support it. So if you supplemented it with solar, and if you didn't have the opportunity, you were still charging at night, you're utilizing electricity at the prime time when they need to deliver it, because it's being created on a smaller scale, but they still have to create the electricity and deliver it and dump it. So if you're taking that electricity up, then you're just utilizing it. So it's not a bad thing at all. And it could, help the power companies probably more than it would hurt them in that case. But it definitely takes away from the fossil fuel guys that are creating, the oil companies. That's probably the companies that will get hit the most by it. But, and of course they wouldn't want that. But it's the power deliveries, the torque delivery from electric is incredible. And if you ever want to see extreme type of electricity, just go to YouTube and look up electric cars drag racing. The race cars, and you'll see it's pretty empowering. But yeah, they're pretty quick if you want them to be. But you're right, it does make you a better driver, because you look to use your momentum, and you look not to waste energy braking late and accelerating hard. You have a tendency to want to accelerate a little more smoothly and look further ahead and brake further ahead, and try to recoup some of that energy through the kinetic energy recovery system. So I think you're right on all accounts.
So, and you're probably not used to having this kind of conversation with the girl. So, anyway, go on.
I try to have it with as many people as possible, but I wear people out sometimes. So I'm glad to hear somebody else do the talking.
Well, I always tell people I'm not fit for regular society anymore, because I'm just so annoying. Well, we've run out of time. Actually, we've run a little bit over time. I want to get one more question in, if you can hang with me a couple minutes, and then we want to get contact information out so people can contact you.
That sounds good.
Okay, so can you compare the cost of solar versus sort of traditional electricity?
No, because it changes from place to place. In California, you have a tiered powered system where you're paying 13 cents a kilowatt hour up to 44 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's a big disparity in cost, and depending on the more power you use, whatever you're addressing, you would need no incentives for the higher cost electricity if you offset that to get a quick return on the investment. But here in Georgia, we're 12.5 cents, in Alabama it's 8 cents, up in 16 cents up in Massachusetts and stuff like that. So the cost is in parity in about a third of the states, or maybe 25% of the states. There's a cost parity for solar, and then the other states it's not there yet, but it's not far away. It's pretty close. Cool.
So let's give contact information, your website, and do you have sort of like, I don't know, any kind of direct consumer education in case someone wants to get more information that way?
Yeah, usually you can get through it to the website. We've got our two companies, and the first one's Solar Energy USA, and that would be solarenergy-usa.com, and our other business is netzero-usaindustry.com. So those are the two, in the office numbers, 770-754-0200.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Perry, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Beth.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Oh, we can talk about solar all day, every day, as far as I'm concerned. I think finding the right mix in regards to working with utilities and creating the right kind of conversation is imperative. But the truth is even if you don't do solar, we can all start with turning off our lights and being a little more mindful of the waste that is inherent in the way we live. So, anyway, that's my little speech for the day. Thank you so much to Perry for being our guest. We're going to be talking about renewable energy again next week because I just can't talk about it enough. We so appreciate y'all listening in each and every week to Speaking of Green.